Welcome everyone this evening to our second of two listening sessions. I'm here with Chief Paul Leva. I'm Town Supervisor Corporal Genzi. This meeting is open to listen to your comments, and then we'll move on to the committee. That'll be the next meeting will be scheduled for, that's December 2nd.
Yes.
At 6 p.m. That information will be sent out prior to that meeting. Chief.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending. So just to recap, as part of Executive Order 203 issued by the governor in August of this year, all municipal police departments are required to do an assessment that involves the community stakeholders. The state issued a workbook and sort of a rough schedule of how to do this. We've selected committee members. There's about 15, I think, on the committee. I went to a training session a couple of weeks ago on basically how to handle this in the best manner. So we have a schedule of meetings that we're going to go through. The questions we have to address that are covered by the state are broken down into about 4 sections. But before we get into the sections and attacking questions, specific questions, they recommended that the first 2 sessions were listening sessions that were open to the public. We're going to make all the meetings open to the public, I guess, by Zoom. People can sign up for them, and I believe they're being recorded. This is the second listening session, and it's going to allow people to make public comment on the police or anything along those lines that they'd like to talk about. So I know there's a lot of people on the call. You don't have to speak if you don't want to, but if you're so inclined, then Mr. DiPaolo will let you in. He's moderating the meeting. So thank you again for attending, and we appreciate it.
Thanks, Chief. So again, anyone interested in speaking, please message us on here on the chat feature. Please include your name and address, or you can also use the Zoom raise hand feature, and we will call on anyone in the order that they requested to speak. Please keep in mind that you do have to have your video enabled in order to speak, and we do ask that you limit your commentary to 3 minutes, just out of respect for everyone else. And I believe this meeting will be going till about 8 o'clock. So again, anyone interested in speaking, please either chat us, message us, or use the Zoom raise hand feature. Okay, Mr. Abenanti, you should have your microphone ready, and you're up.
First of all, thank you for holding this session. As you know, I'm the New York State Assemblyman who represents the area. I have been sitting in on the different sessions that the different communities within the 92nd Assembly District have been holding. Greenberg, I know, has a full committee and lots of people involved. And I'm starting to listen to some of the villages. I haven't gotten to all of them yet, but I think it's important that you do what you're doing, that we hear from the community. I would also like to suggest that the chiefs talk to each other and compare notes so that there's something of a uniform policy across the county. I don't know if the county is at the present, if the county leadership is bringing everyone together, but I think it would be helpful for the different communities to try to move in the same direction so that policies in the different communities are not extremely different. As our county grows, as more and more people are moving in from different communities, we find that it's no longer the situation where we have communities very different from the others. So I think that we should have some conversation among the communities as to where we should be moving. Secondly, I have some concerns about the way police officers are trained to deal with people with special needs. We have seen over and over again supposedly trained police officers trained in dealing with people with special needs or mental illness, any type of cognitive difficulties, not handling the situations as those of us who would be sitting on the side would look at and say should be handled. There was just a report today out of New York City about an incident that occurred a year and a half ago, which has created this conversation all over again. I don't have any particular incidents, fortunately, in Mount Pleasant to discuss, but I'm looking forward and want to make sure that we don't have a problem. We have a lot of young people who have special needs, or we are seeing more and more people distraught with mental problems because of COVID. It's bringing out, it's exacerbating problems that people have had. And I don't want to see the first situation where one of our police officers confronts somebody turn out to be a tragedy. So my question would be, what training does each of our police officers receive? And is there any ongoing training beyond the initial training for police officers? We have, I'm aware that the newer police officers are trained. There is a course in the initial training at when they're first brought in as police officers. But I'm not aware of other courses being given since the initial training for police officers. I recognize it's expensive. I recognize that sending a police officer for a day or so out for specialized training does cost money and requires you to fill in the hours. But to prevent a tragedy, I think it's really important that we take a look at that. And as I said, we now have, as you know, I have a son with special needs. He attends Pleasantville High School. He would not be able to respond to a police officer's command. We spent a lot of time training him to get out of and not sit down on public sidewalks.
Mr. Avenatti, forgive me for interrupting. I just want to let you know we're about at 4 minutes, so if you can begin to wrap it up.
Okay, I will end up then with this final point. So all I'm saying is the normal command of a police officer when they encounter someone would be drop what you've got in your hands, sit down, lie down on the street, whatever. I'm just giving that as an example. My son and the other kids in his class have been taught to not do that. So they would not be responding. And when they saw somebody in a uniform who they didn't know, they would probably run. So you're confronting, and most of these kids are not at all dangerous and wouldn't hurt anybody. So my point is that you're dealing with citizens who live in our community who would not respond the way we would expect a normal person to respond. And I would hope that our police officers are trained and will continue to be trained to deal with these circumstances. And I hope that in your report or in your, as you move forward, you confront this situation and make that part of your plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person wishing to speak is Mr. DeRubius.
Yes, how you doing tonight? So I'd like to just kind of bring up what I said last week about our police department. Again, I've been in this town for over 20 years, and I think our police department does an excellent job. I haven't seen or heard of too many instances in our community that has raised any question in my mind. From some of the comments from some of the people that attended the meeting at our last meeting concerned me because I felt that some of those comments were kind of leaning towards attacking our police department. I want to make sure that these meetings go to understanding what Tom Abate said, that maybe some additional training, better training or so forth on how to handle certain situations. But I don't want to take the power away from the police department, because I got a sense across the country that people are afraid to act, and we've taken that ability away from the police department because the media and the sense of what's been going on lately really has been negative towards them. And that's a concern for me. I think we have to allow our police to do their job. I know that me on my job, if I wasn't allowed to do what I need to do, I'm useless at my job. And I think that's the same case with the police department. With that being said, you guys have a very difficult job. You have to make decisions on, within seconds. And again, you're trained more than the average person. Yes, could there be better training? I want better or more training in certain circumstances. I think that's where we need to address these meetings too, and not attack. I have a quick question for Chief Oliva. Chief, with the cottage schools that we have in town, and I'm just kind of curious because I get misinformation, how many times in a week or even in a day are you guys called to that location to handle, I guess, a situation that the school can't handle?
So it could be anywhere from, I'm sure there's days where we don't go, but there's days that we might respond to one of the residential treatment facilities 6 times, sometimes more, it depends.
Okay, so from, again, and doing a little bit of research, I understand there's quite a bit of calls, and that takes a lot of our police time at these cottages. Can I assume that they have social workers there that are addressing the needs of these children that need help, right? They're there for a reason. But yet when they get to the point where a social worker can't handle that situation, the police are called and they come in to do what I think you guys do very well and handle that situation. So again, it's not that you guys are not used to dealing, especially in this town, with those type of situations. I want to keep these meetings to what we can do to our police department to support them so they can support our community better with better training. I don't want this to become a negative attack on the police and talk about, things that have happened in the past or, what the media wants us to believe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Sandra Natale. Please enable your video. Oh,
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
yes, you're all set.
All right, great. I just wanted to make a comment, and it's more, I don't usually speak at these things. I listened to one, and I think it was a Greenberg one that alarmed me with some of the things the people there were saying or that had been on that call. And it was things like, defund the police and, send in social workers and things that I think would lead to more anarchy. I'm a mom of 3 school-age children. One has special needs also, and I live near the county prison. And if I call 911, I don't want to go through a 15-minute questionnaire to determine if a social worker should come out. I want someone who's armed that can come out to defend me, my family, that can detain or call for backup. So I just don't want these like crazy ideas to become the protocol. I mean, I think there's a step in the process for social workers, definitely down the road for rehabilitation, but not the initial step. Because when I hear things like that, I think for the first time ever that, holy cow, do we need to go get a gun in the house? Something I've never wanted to do or entertain. Again, because I have school-age children, one who has special needs in the home. So, I want to make sure that doesn't ever change as like the first thing people do. Call 911, get someone over here and defend us or protect us. And the other thing I just want to add is that, it's not, the police, I think, are getting too much of a bad media, and the media is so one-sided. You have to really compare sources to understand what's really going on. But there's been times where I have had to call the police because my elder parents, they had someone knocking on their door that wouldn't leave and they didn't answer. And I called the town police and they sent someone over who cleared things up. So it's all those other things too that police are there for, to do for us, that we need them available for and just, staffed up for. So there is a lot of, there's not like, yeah, there's bad press, there's bad things that happen, there's bad eggs in every occupation that there is in the world. But we need them. We need our police to help us when we're in trouble. And 911 is the first place I'm going to call, and I hope that someone would come and respond and that protocol is never taken away. Because I think if Governor Cuomo had to walk around without his security or put his kids out there without their own personal detail security, I don't think he'd be so willing to make some of the changes that some of these people are coming up with. And that's all I just want to say. I want to say thank you, and that's really it.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Christine Huguenot.
Okay. Are we good?
You're all set.
Okay. Hi. Thank you for the opportunity. I have attended a couple of the county meetings, and I also requested and read through the New York State Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative. I read through the entire document. I have been a town resident for over 31 years. As reading through the document, and I know a lot of times they call them guidelines and suggestions, I don't know if you have gotten any feedback in terms of what they consider sacred cows or the things that they really want you to focus on in terms of training, direction, if funding is going to be either given or possibly taken away if their guidelines and suggestions aren't followed through. And if there's going to be more supporting documentation from a state level, if it's going to be more than guidelines and requirements, and if you see that down the road. I guess a few of my concerns are, one, financial, because there are 39 different police departments within the county, and some have very similar needs. Others are, when you're dealing with bigger cities, they clearly have different needs than maybe a town of Mount Pleasant or Pleasantville that we might have. And I would think would be extremely cost ineffective for every one of a similar neighboring school police departments to employ round-the-clock social workers, because you can't just have one. You would need that round the clock. The kinds of resources and trainings, if they thought of maybe if there's a big consideration like shared services, similar to what BOCES does from an education standpoint, where several districts join a consortium and they'll share services, special ed or whatever. If that's possibly a consideration for the police chiefs or county town supervisors, if that's something that that has been discussed. The other thing I saw in some of the state documents, and my youngest just turned 28, and I have 5 kids that went through actually Byram Hills schools, but we live in Mount Pleasant, talking about not having a presence in the schools because in certain areas and neighborhoods, it's threatening to the youths. So I don't know what kind of data we have as a community to support that presence has actually been a positive one, because if so, I would hate for any outside agency or governing body coming in to say, well, since that doesn't work well in certain areas, you can't continue it in yours. So I don't know if that's something that needs to be supported or investigated in terms of if that's a pushback from a state, if we can still keep the services that mean a lot to us as a community. Okay. The other concern I have that I haven't seen mentioned, and myself and a lot of people I know have been, is victim of identity theft. And I understand in all, a lot of the documentation is let's reform in terms of how you handle mentally ill or racially charged situations. But that's a huge thing on the horizon. I mean, it's happening now in terms of training police forces and investigative services toward that. I don't see that mentioned anywhere, but I would hate for that if we're looking at how to enhance our police departments, if that can be another area of training and that needs to be beefed up, because as this woman's, there are elderly people who are constantly being targeted. I consider myself relatively savvy, and I got, blindsided and luckily caught it in time, but that's clearly another avenue of police work that needs to be supported also.
Miss Huguenot, I apologize. I just want to let you know we're a little past 4 minutes.
I'm sorry. Thank you. So in advance, thank you for your time and consideration to the entire community. I have a son who's a mental health counselor and a sergeant in the National Guard. So I understand both sides of it, and I appreciate your time and service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, anyone that wishes to speak, please message us using the chat feature, include your name and address, and or use the Zoom raise hand feature. We ask that you limit your commentary to 3 minutes if possible, and please enable your video if you wish to speak. Okay, Miss Katie Ross, you are next. And you're all set.
Hi. So I just wanted to, I think, get a better understanding of what kind of reforms will be in place for our police officers to be protecting particularly people of color within the town of Mount Pleasant. There's obviously a long history with policing within our country, and I think it's really important that because there is an obvious and express need within the town of Mount Pleasant for our police, that we, figure how to best serve all community members. And so I was just kind of, I guess you don't really have an answer, but just, what kind of implicit bias, racial sensitivity training, that kind of thing will occur specifically with Mount Pleasant police officers and their ability to best serve and protect everyone within the community.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Kelsey Paget. Please enable your video. Okay, you're all set.
All right. Hi. I spoke last week at length, so I'm not going to repeat myself on that. But I would like to emphasize that I think that this committee will need to solicit public feedback in other ways rather than just these listening sessions. The amount of people who've heard about these sessions, I think, is quite small. Also, I think the committee needs to partner with minority communities, with different organizations to make sure that we're hearing from all kinds of people in our community and not just those who are most likely to be able to attend a Zoom meeting at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday or a Tuesday. I also think that this committee needs to look at any complaints that were made against the department in the last year or so, and to create an online survey to get more feedback and maybe do some in-person canvassing. I'm not entirely certain because with COVID, you don't really want to do that. But I think that we need to hear from the public in a bigger way than this. And I know a lot of other municipalities are doing online surveys, so I think that's a good start. Also, I want to push for all meetings done by the town of Mount Pleasant to have Spanish and sign language interpretation available, because there's good. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but there are people that local government is not accessible to currently, and that's sad. Everybody should be able to participate in the local government. The other thing is, I went on the police's website, and I'm not entirely sure like where their jurisdiction is. It says that the police department covers 32 square miles, including the hamlets of Hawthorne, Thornwood, and Valhalla. Coverage also extends into the unincorporated section of Pleasantville, as well as portions of Sleepy Hollow, Pecanico Hills, Briarcliff, and Chappaqua. I mean, that's a little confusing. It's like portions of which parts? And are there areas where the village policing in Sleepy Hollow and Pleasantville overlaps with the town policing? How is that handled? Is that necessary? Because it seems odd to me that if I lived in Sleepy Hollow, I would have my village police, my town police, my county police, and then, you've got the state police too over by the bridge. Anyway, so that's a question I'm wondering about, but doesn't need to be answered currently. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Supervisor, Chief, I do not have anyone else wishing to speak at the moment.
You want to give it a minute or so, Nick, and we'll,
Yep, I'll continue to monitor.
thank you.
Okay, Mary Hegarty, please enable your video. You'll be next.
Okay.
You're all set.
Oh, thank you. I had a question. Is there a way to see who the 15 members are of the task force, the names? Is it on the town website? And the second question is, are there any people of color on the task force? And I would concur with Kelsey about reaching out, getting a little more, getting more people involved. I have a colleague who lives in the town, and she just couldn't make it tonight. She had a school board something with her child in school, and she really wanted to attend. So an online survey sounds like a good idea. Yeah, so just curious about who's on the task force, and is there any people of color on the task force? And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. We could, once we get we could publicize the name of the committee.
Okay. And then if anyone has suggestions of any better way, I mean, if we were gonna put out a survey, would have to be on the town website or?
Chief and Supervisor Fulgenzi, if you could just speak up, we can't hear you.
Sure, I'm just sort of spitballing a little in an effort to try to see how we might be able to reach these other persons that might have interest in making comments or being part of the process. So I know obviously we blast stuff out, the town does, and we're trying to hit social media. But if anyone has suggestions or feels that there's a particular group in town that wants to be included or we need to have included, then maybe I would suggest commenting or trying to get that information to the police reform at Mount Pleasant NY email address, and then it might assist us in making this as broad as possible.
We could also look at the possibility of an online survey and how that's done,
Sure.
how that can be blasted out. If somebody else, another community may be doing it, we can see what they're doing.
Sure.
Again, anyone wishing to speak, if you can just chat us on the message feature or use the Zoom raise hand feature. Just include your name, address, and please limit any commentary to 3 minutes. Okay, Mr. Abenanti, you want to speak again?
Just a suggestion. I would be willing, if you gave me some kind of a notice, to send it out to my email list. Maybe Margaret Cunzio would do the same thing, and Peter, our state senator, would do the same thing. Be glad to, we may be overlapping with your lists, but at least we could get that out for you. If you want to give us some little notice about what you're doing and when the next meeting is.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we post the meetings?
I believe the meeting schedule, I don't know if we formally did or not, but we'll do that. We have a schedule of the rest of the meetings. I'm not sure if it got posted yet. We had one date that was in question, and I think we have that ironed out. So we will have the schedule of meetings posted, and so that on the town website, so that people can see it. And
We'll also post a list of the committee members.
right, we'll identify the committee members, and we'll also do that on the town website.
Okay, there's Tony C. that wishes to speak. If you can enable your video, please. Okay, you're all set. Tony C., you're all set. You can begin.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I've been in the community 20 years, and I just want to say I think the police do a great job. And I want to thank you for your service to our community. And as a taxpayer of this community, when I call 911, I want a police officer showing up to my house, not a social worker. So please consider this. It's very important. The police do a great job, and thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. DeRubius would like to speak again.
All right,
You're
great,
all set.
thank you. So I have a question. Obviously, there's going to be difference of opinions among either the community or some of the members that are on the committee. How will the committee, or how do you plan to make a decision if there's a disagreement with what the committee said? For example, bringing up, Kelsey wants to bring up stuff that's happened in the past. I think that's absolutely useless. I agree, the cops, there's been a couple of things here and there. In fact, some of the stuff that's happened in the past was staged. that was written all over the media. So I think that was unfair to our police department. I think we need to move forward. There's no reason to bring anything up. So when this comes up and you have a disagreement like that, how will the committee, will they vote on whether they're going to, pursue those issues or not? And, again, an interpreter that's going to cost us money and all this other stuff. If there's anybody that joins this committee and requests that, I think that person should request that. But if we don't have those people on this committee or on these websites, Zoom calls, then there's no reason for it. But again, that's just my thoughts, and I'd like to know how the committee's going to pursue those disagreements, whether it's a vote amongst everybody in the community, is it just the committee members, or so forth. I don't know if I was clear on my question, but.
Thank you. I think it's very important that the committee comes to a consensus on different issues. We may never agree on all the suggestions, but we put them all together. We try to come to a decision that we feel is best for the Mount Pleasant Police Department. All departments are different, all communities are different. So we have to look at how do we best serve the Mount Pleasant community. That's my opinion. But I don't know if we'll ever get a 100% consensus, everybody agreeing on everything, but that's the reason we're going to hash this out amongst the committee and try to come up with the best solution for us.
James Collins, you're next. If you can enable your video, you're all set.
Thank you very much. And thank you for letting me speak. And again, I just want to also thank the Mount Pleasant Police for many, many, many years of service to me, to my family. They've been nothing but wonderful to us. But as far as these discussions are concerned, I just want to make sure that we understand what the scope of that discussion is. Some of the talks are a little bit off police reform, some are not. Like the sign language discussion, to me, that's not really a police discussion or police reform discussion. That's a little bit off topic to me. So I just want to make sure that we continue down the path of figuring out exactly what the topic is and stick to that topic as we move forward. But again, thank you very much to Mount Pleasant Police for everything they do. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. You have guidelines. You have specific questions that you're supposed to focus on.
Yeah. So I can get that. So these first two sessions are listening sessions, so we're keeping it pretty open for comment, which is what we want to do. When we get into the next meetings, there'll be specific areas that we have to cover and questions that we're going to have to answer or that I'll have to answer, and I'll be looking for that feedback. And part of it may be educational, so that the community actually knows what we do and how we do it. And I think that's important for me to convey. We don't really advertise a lot of what we do, and the officers here do a lot of good work, and I probably should post a lot more of the things that they do. But I'm said at the last meeting, I'm anxious to be able to show the community what we actually do and what the officers here do. And I'm proud of the work they do. We obviously always strive to continuously improve, and the world is always changing, and so police work is changing, and we want to make sure that we use this opportunity to be as responsive and to the community as we can be, and offer the best public service that we can offer, and make sure that the taxpayers of Mount Pleasant get the best bang for their buck, and while keeping everybody safe.
The ongoing training, you're always going to ongoing training.
Yeah, and we do, I mean, we have a lot of training going on. I can showcase some of what the officers learn while they're in the academy. Some of what our ongoing training is like, we're gonna get into that. And the training that the officers receive, just their experience level from being out on the road and what they do every day. So I'll be happy to get into that as we proceed through these meetings.
Okay, Stuart Hendrickson, you are next. You're also.
Good evening. Sorry for the dogs in the background. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to chat with you. First, thank you to the police force for all that they do, and thanks to all of you for participating in the call tonight. It's encouraging to see that we have such great community involvement. The one thing I'd like to say is, a couple of things that I've heard this evening. I think it's just as we go through this process and you guys are listening to the questions, I think it's important to keep in mind that the members of the community expand well beyond the 34 people that are on this call. So I think it will be important as we move forward to ensure that we find a way to confirm that opinions, facts, feelings and emotions of all members of the community continue to be valued and taken into account by any of the decisions that are made moving forward. I just think it's important that Mount Pleasant and the community is more than the 34 people on this call, and it's our duty to ensure that everyone's opinions are represented and taken into account.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Hussein Elsgobi. Apologize if I did not get your last name correct.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. I've been told much worse. You hear me?
So your audio is a little staticky.
Bear with me. How is it now?
The same, unfortunately.
Okay. Same here. Same static.
Same, yes.
All right. Well, then you know what? I'm going to try another time. So please go ahead with someone else.
Okay, thank you. If it ends up being any different in a few moments, feel free to just message us again. Okay, next up is Steve Cardian. If you could just enable your video. You're all set.
Okay, you unmuted me?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, thanks for allowing me to speak. There's a lot that I really love to talk about, but one thing in specific that I think is instilling fear in a lot of people, and it's the defund the police movement. I speak in the national media. I've spoke on defunding the police and the riots in our major cities across the United States about 75 times since June. And I just want to say that often when we talk to someone about defunding the police, they don't have an answer. And it seems that it's a talking point that they've picked up for the media. There are no positive studies on the benefit to any community on defunding the police. And there is no think tank study anywhere in the country that says it's a good thing. On the contrary, there's dozens that support the police and the non-defunding and continue, accreditation as we move forward. There's statistical data out there that shows the vast majority of people in the United States do not want to defund the police. Matter of fact, many in communities of color and high crime areas want to increase their police presence. The advocates of defunding the police are major cities like Portland, Seattle, New York City, Minneapolis. That's the beginning of what started this. And they've just allocated $500,000 because they don't have enough police officers to do the job. So the mere mentioning of defunding the police instills fear in a number of people, and a couple of the people that I heard speak tonight, including Sandra and Rocco. And I just want you to know that there is nothing to support except the failed institution of defunding the police by failed cities across America. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Katie Ross would like to speak again. If you can enable your video, please. You're all set?
Yeah, so just regarding Steve's statement, I just wanted to, I think, on that point, recognize that this conversation wouldn't be necessarily happening if there was going to be a full defund the police movement in the town of Mount Pleasant. So I'm not sure that's particularly relevant to the conversation just because it is about police reform, and that's what's clearly trying to occur within this conversation particularly. And so as it stands right now, that doesn't seem to be the direction that the town would like to move in. And so I think the mere existence of this conversation really speaks to the fact that that's not necessarily a concern right now. And I think in terms of, budgeting, that's, a different subject for, different people, just a different conversation in general. But at least from what my understanding of what this conversation was about, it was about how the police as it exists now within the town of Mount Pleasant can best serve everyone within the town of Mount Pleasant. And that includes, Spanish speakers, like people of color, and also people who have been, like many of you have been living here for, decades. So, everyone has a right, I believe, to that protection. And I don't think that's necessarily what's going to be happening right now. Otherwise, this would be a very different Zoom call. So that was just a point I wanted to make.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Lee Parker. Please enable your video. You're all set.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick comment, and I agree with the previous speaker that it's about police reform. It's not about defunding. On the issue of funding, I read through the proposed budget, and certainly there's not a, we're not looking at any kind of defunding. My question that I would like to see addressed is, on the proposed budget, in addition to the salaries, there's an additional about 20% of that amount being earmarked for likely overtime for holidays and whatever else. And I'm just wondering if the money is better spent on overtime, or if it's better spent if there's a need for additional people, if it should be spent on additional resources as opposed to overtime.
Well, the police department runs pretty lean for a town with the population of our size. It's one of the things I'm going to get into when we have the future meetings. We currently have 48 police officers and a population around 43,000. So it's about one officer per 1,000 people, which is pretty well below the recommendations that the FBI has. Officers wear many different hats. We have specialized units, but everyone is, with the exception of the detective division and civilian employees do multiple jobs. We try to use our resources as efficiently as possible. I'll have to do the research, but I would pretty well imagine that if you looked at our budget totals, that they're pretty well below what other departments of a similar town might be. So we always try to offer the best public service. We consider the safety of the officers and the safety of the residents. But we also have to be fiscally responsible too. And I'm proud that the officers work very hard, and we really don't have a lot of excess fat. No one is hanging around not doing anything. So when it comes to overtime, some of our overtime is reimbursable. There are television shows and movie details that are out there. Our area happens to be particularly attractive to some of these producers. We have traffic, Con Edison details that require a police officer. So when you look at the budget numbers, part of that is reimbursable. To hire additional employees is expensive because you have pension costs and benefits. So we try to strike the balance between having enough officers to keep it safe and at the same time using a little cushion of overtime for unexpected things that may come up. You could have officers injured and out, which may cause overtime, or you could have a huge investigation, which might require a lot of resources and a lot of officers working. So it's kind of a balancing act, trying to project where you might be budget-wise and how many officers we can get by with to protect everybody and still be fiscally responsible. So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, the next speaker, Hussein, I believe is on another device, so hopefully this works.
Okay, can you hear me this time?
Loud and clear.
All right, great, thank you. Hey, listen, I just wanted to just mention a couple of things that prompted me to say a few words that, from everything that I've been listening to. First, I want to say that I am a member of the committee, and I'm also a member of an organization called the Upper Westchester Muslim Society. And we purchased the old JCC property on 600 Bear Ridge Road and have been there now since roughly August of last year. And we consider ourselves privileged to be in this community. And I also wanted to point out that I am originally born in Egypt many years ago, and certainly consider myself a person of color. And just as importantly, our organization, Upper Westchester Muslim Society, is very much multiracial, multi-ethnic. We have people who are from Ireland, and of course, white Americans, but the majority of people are from, I would say, Asian subcontinent, Middle East. So, I represent a good chunk of I would say a minority group. So I just wanted to mention that to you because I saw that was a question they wanted to. Someone asked about who's on the committee and do we have people of color. So I just wanted to point that out. Second thing I wanted to mention to you is just a suggestion. We UWMS for many years have a bunch of volunteers. Everybody's a volunteer. We really don't have anybody who's an employee per se. And we've had a need for expert help and during certain, situations. within the community, whether it's medical help or technical help or whatever. And we have sort of like a phone tree where we can enlist people's help in short notice. And I was going to bring that up at some point as a suggestion that for consideration, which is that to the extent that Chief Oliva and his staff may have a need for translation services. Our community has probably over 100 different countries, from places like Ghana and Senegal and Russia and Trinidad and you name it. And this is not at a cost of anything, so I don't want you to get any impression there. But we certainly would be very open to having that at the disposal of the Mount Pleasant Police Department to the extent that they may have it as a need. So just wanted to point those couple of things out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Supervisor, Chief Oliva, at this time, I do not have anyone else that is looking to speak.
Nick, you want to just give it another minute, just in case somebody may be having trouble doing that?
Absolutely. Jennifer Sicoranzo, if you can enable your video, you are next to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're all set.
All right. So this has been brought up a few times, this term defund the police, and I know a lot of people are scared by it, but I think one of the principles behind it is, as Chief Oliva has said a couple of times, is that the police wear many hats. The point of defund the police is to look at, maybe are there some hats that the police are wearing that could be best worn by somebody else, and make services, create departments that can better handle situations. I mean, the creation of the ambulance service in America was the original defund the police. Originally, police were responding to medical calls, but they weren't qualified or trained to do so. So a group of people who didn't want the police responding created the ambulance, and now, you know, that's a staple in our life, and we couldn't imagine our life without it. So my question, and something I want addressed, is, are there hats that the police are wearing that can be best worn by somebody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The ambulance corps was more and more out of requirements than it was anything else.
Mr. DeRubius, you're next to speak.
Thanks. Thanks for having me speak a third time, but questions come up as others speak. So yeah, the whole defund the police thing, I'd like to make a comment about that. I know just this past week, you know, police officers are first responders in a lot of situations. I know that even though we have an ambulance or EMTs that will show up at a house, many times the police officers will show up and save a life before even the EMT and the ambulance get there. So they are providing a very good service in that respect. We just had a situation this week where a police officer went in and there was a fire in a house, and he was the first person on site. I read this through the Valhalla Fire Department, and they were commending the officer for doing so because he was in there. He saved pretty much most of the house from burning down by going in and doing what he had to do, closing the doors, stopping it from spreading, and then the fire department came and go. So again, who's going to determine, I want a police officer coming to my house. If I wanted to call social services for something because I had a child with special needs, then maybe there should be a different number, like you said, for that. But, as long as the police are coming to my house, I'm comfortable. I know that they're trained. They're going to be able to, be the first people to save me, hopefully, while other help comes. In fact, I think some of the police officers have some better training, from the volunteer ambulance course. Now, they're people that we have in town because they go through extensive training. So, again, I just want to make that comment that police are first responders. They've done well in our community. We had a situation just this week where, that was a perfect example of that. And I know where police officers have come and saved people's lives because they were the first ones on site to be able to do CPR. So again, it's a big conversation we need to have, and I understand what everybody's comments are. But I certainly don't want to take what the police officers are doing today. Maybe, again, additional training, better situations for them. But, I don't think we want to go backwards. I don't want to see go backwards. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Nick, I guess if there's no more speakers, we appreciate everyone taking the time to offer their comments. We look forward to the committee meeting. We're going to look into the possibility of an online survey. There's a couple different entities we could use to try to do that, to reach out to the entire community as best we possibly can. And then start our committee meetings, and they will all be recorded, and the public will be able to listen in on those meetings. And you can always make comments by email. So it's never a closed session. But again, I appreciate everyone's comments, and I appreciate you taking the time to work with us on this. Sure.
Thank you for participating. And again, if anyone has a suggestion as far as how to reach out to a segment of the community that you don't think we're hitting, and you have any suggestions other than the survey, which we'll look into specific people or groups that you might be able to identify, and if you can email it to that police reform at Mount Pleasant, we would appreciate it, and we will make the effort to do that. So thank you for joining us, and have a great night.